All right, welcome. Today we're pulling back the curtain on modern CSS. It's really the secret sauce that takes a plain website and turns it into one of those slick, interactive experiences we use every single day. So, how does it all actually work? Let's dive in and find out.
You ever been on a website and just thought, whoa, how did they do that? That really cool animation or that picture with the perfect frame. Well, believe it or not, more often than not, the answer is just a few clever lines of CSS. And today, we're going to see exactly how it's done.
First up, let's look at some foundational styling for text and images. Now, these effects might seem simple, but honestly, they're the workhorses of web design. They add that extra bit of polish that makes everything look so much better and with hardly any effort.
So let's kick things off with something called a text stroke. This is just a fantastic way to make your headlines and titles really stand out. You're basically adding a crisp outline to the letters, which is perfect for branding or just making text easier to read on a busy background.
And the code for this? It's surprisingly simple. It really all comes down to this one line, -webkit -text stroke. Now, that little -webkit part, that's what's called a vendor prefix. You used to need it for browsers like Chrome and Safari. You might not always need it anymore, but you'll still see it everywhere, so it's good to know what it is. The 2px just sets how thick the outline is, and, well, black sets the color. So literally that easy. And boom, here's the results. Just look at that difference. The text just jumps right off the page. You've got that light cyan fill, and it's perfectly outlined by that sharp 2-pixel black stroke. That's a huge visual impact from just a single line of code. Okay, moving on from text to images. Let's talk about those really sleek, glossy reflections you see all the time, especially on product websites. How do they get that cool mirrored effect? Well, the magic here is another WebKit property. This time it's WebKit Box Reflect. And looking at the code, it's pretty straightforward. That first word below just tells the reflection where to show up. And that 5px, that just creates that little bit of space between the original image and its reflection. And the great thing is you have total control. You can set the direction to be below, to the right, to the left, wherever you want. You can adjust that offset to be bigger or smaller. And here's the really cool part. You can add a gradient to make the reflection fade out, which just gives it a much more realistic feel. And here you can see it all in action. On the left, you've got a vertical reflection that fades out from top to bottom, and on the right, a horizontal one that fades from left to right. It just adds this sense of depth and polish that makes the whole page feel way more professional. All right, let's take borders to a whole new level. I mean, a simple one-color line is fine, but what if we could use an entire image to frame our content?
Well, the border image property does exactly what it sounds like. It lets you use an image as a border. And this is so cool for creating themed designs. You could have rustic wood frames for a nature blog, or maybe sleek metallic borders for a tech website.
So how does this even work? It all starts with a property called border image slice. Okay, imagine you have a square image, and you digitally cut it into 9 little pieces. The 4 corners, the 4 edges, and a piece in the middle. CSS is smart enough to keep the corners exactly as they are, but then it lets you decide what to do with those edge pieces. And here we see it in action. The code tells the browser how to slice up the image and then to stretch those edge pieces to fill whatever space is needed, and the result is this seamless frame that keeps the corners perfect while stretching the sides to fit. This is great for things like gradients or simple textures that won't look weird when they're distorted. Now check this out. We're going to change just one word in that code from stretch to repeat, and look at the result. It's completely different. Instead of stretching the edge pieces, the browser now tiles them over and over, creating this patterned style. You'd use this for things like intricate patterns that you definitely don't want to distort. It's amazing how powerful one single keyword can be. So we've styled all our static stuff. Now for the really fun part. Let's bring the page to life with some CSS animations. The heart and soul of any CSS animation is the @keyframes rule. Think of it like you're a director setting up the key scenes in a movie. You just define what an element should look like at specific moments in time, from 0% at the start to 100% at the end. The browser then does all the heavy lifting and automatically fills in all the in-between frames for you. And this is what's possible with keyframes. By just defining the position and opacity at 0%, 25%, 50%, and so on, we've created this really precise diamond-shaped path for the image to follow as it fades in and out. That dotted line you see? That's the exact journey we defined in our code. So once you've defined your keyframes, you apply them to an element with the animation property. This table breaks it down really nicely. You give it a name to link to your keyframes, you set a duration, a delay. You can even tell it how many times to repeat. You could set it to infinite for a looping background effect, which is really cool, and you can even set the direction it should play in. All right, finally, let's look at CSS transitions. These are similar to animations, but they're all about creating smooth changes that happen because a user does something, like hovering their mouse over an element. So what's the real difference between an animation and a transition? This is a question that trips up a lot of people. But basically, animations can be complex, with lots of keyframes, and they can loop all by themselves. Transitions are way simpler. They just define a smooth change between two states, a start state and an end state. And they're usually triggered by something the user does.
And that trigger, that something the user does, is very often this thing called the hover pseudoclass. It's a super simple but incredibly powerful instruction. It just tells the browser, hey, as soon as the mouse is over this image, I want you to apply some new styles.
So how does it all come together? It's really a two-step process. First, on the element itself, you add the transition property. This kind of gets it ready. You're telling it, hey, if your transform property changes, I want you to take 4 seconds to do it smoothly. Then, in your hover rule, you define that change. In this case, we're telling it to rotate and scale up. The browser then automatically handles that smooth journey between the two states for you.
So when you put it all together, the text strokes, the image borders, the animations, and these interactive transitions, you can see how all these seemingly small properties are actually the fundamental building blocks of the modern web. They're what let us create the rich, engaging experiences we all expect whenever we go online. So, we've seen the code behind the curtain. It's not some impossible magic, right? It's just a few simple lines that can create some truly incredible visual effects. The real magic isn't just knowing the properties, it's about how you can combine them in new and creative ways. So now the real question is, what will you create?